We're funded by our members and by Kaufman-Rawson. If you have repetitive rule-based processes, Kaufman-Rawson can help automate them so employees can focus on work that requires creativity, problem-solving skills, and emotional intelligence. Go beyond the numbers at kaufmanrawson.com.
Hey, did you notice something was missing when you pressed play? There's no paywall, no monthly subscription to fill out. This is how public media works. We are powered by you, by listeners. Listener donations make up the biggest part of the money that helps keep WLRN going and growing. You can start by making a monthly donation now, beginning at $5 a month. Become a WLRN member at WLRN.org/donate. It's easy. And while you're tuned in, be sure to hit subscribe for this podcast. Thanks.
Mask up again or stay masked up in South Florida with COVID-19 infections surging. This is the South Florida Roundup on WLRN. I'm Tom Hudson. COVID cases are climbing by double digits compared to a week ago, even here in South Florida, which has some of the highest vaccination rates in the state. The Delta variant of the virus is spreading fast, and more people are in hospitals. Mask requirements are back for some local government buildings, but the rules on what local leaders can do have changed since last summer. So how are mayors responding to the surge this summer? Also this week, the last missing victim from the Surfside condominium collapse was identified. Hundreds of unsafe buildings await decisions in Miami-Dade County. Renters and owners worry about the conditions of their buildings. It's all ahead on our program, made possible by Willie the Bee-Man, bee removal specialist. Welcome to the South Florida Roundup on WLRN. I'm Tom Hudson. Thanks for listening and supporting public radio. South Florida has some of the highest vaccination rates in the state, but our region is not immune to the surge of COVID-19 that has been accelerating this month. Infection rates are climbing along with hospitalizations. Now, later on in this program today, will be talking with local mayors about responses to the increase in COVID-19 cases. We want to hear from you. What are you experiencing in your community? What questions do you have about the virus here? A year and a half into the pandemic, a surge is on. We're experiencing this in the numbers. We're seeing it. Maybe you're hearing about it with friends and family. Maybe you have direct experience with it. The difference this summer, of course, is that there are vaccines. What do you need to know? What do you want to know about the Delta variant? An internal Centers for Disease Control report out on this Friday says that Delta is as contagious as chickenpox. 800-743-WLRN, the phone number, live on this Friday to join our conversation. We want to hear from you. 800-743-WLRN, 800-743-9576. You can also find us on Twitter. Hit us up at WLRN is our call sign there. Dr. Bernard Ashby is with us first, cardiologist and the Florida lead for the Committee to Protect Healthcare. Dr. Ashby, welcome back to WLRN. Nice to have you.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
The CDC describes the community spread of the virus here in South Florida as high. What does that mean?
So that basically means the rate of transmission is above 100 per 100,000 folks in any particular area. And currently, based on a definition, all 67 counties of Florida meet that criteria. So our entire state is considered a high transmissibility state, unfortunately.
Does that mean it's more risky to be out and about now compared to, say, a month or 6 weeks ago?
Yes, it does. As we know, the Delta variant is much more transmissible. The particular virus produces a much higher viral load compared to all of the other variants that we have seen before. In fact, it's 1,000 times higher, and that includes folks who are vaccinated as well. Studies that sampled the nasopharynx airways has showed that even vaccinated folks are capable of transmitting this virus, which is different from the prior variants, which the vaccines had a very good protection against asymptomatic spread from those who were vaccinated. So the equation has certainly changed, and hence the update in the mask mandates or the mask recommendations from the CDC.
Yeah, we'll get into mandate versus recommendation in a second with you, Doctor. But you talk about the Delta variant and the exponential jump in contagiousness that this variant is carrying. South Florida, as you know, has some of the highest vaccination rates in the state of Florida. Some communities, high 60% of those who can get vaccines have at least one shot. So why is the circulation of the virus accelerating here where there are higher rates of vaccinations?
Well, it's precisely from what I mentioned earlier about the nature of the Delta variant, given the high viral load. So just to simplify things, let's say your immune system's fighting off 10 virons. Well, multiply that by 1,000, it's now fighting off 10,000 virons. And so as a result, even if you're vaccinated and you're well protected against severe illness, hospitalizations, and death, you're still more likely to actually become symptomatic and be able to spread the virus. And so that's what we're seeing now. But one other caveat is that because such a large portion of our elderly and vulnerable have been vaccinated, the death rate hasn't spiked to the same degree we've seen with previous surges. And so that does indicate the success of the vaccine in the real world.
We have seen hospitalizations, however, increase, and we've seen the average age of those who are being infected drop. Are you concerned, as you're seeing hospitalizations increase, about what we may see as a higher fatality count coming in the weeks ahead as the Delta variant is at this substantial community spread level?
I am extremely concerned. Again, the vulnerable, which includes the elderly, are more protected, yes. But as you mentioned earlier, we have seen a downshift in the age of hospitalization, which correlates directly to the proportion of the age groups that are vaccinated. And so, unfortunately, our younger demographic are much less vaccinated compared to our older demographic, and we're seeing a reflection of that. And so, do I think that we'll see the death rates that we saw last year? No. But we'll see an increase in the death rate, and any death at this point is one too many as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, indeed, and tragic, and consequences beyond grief. Do we have enough testing going on to get a clear picture of the virus? A year ago, for 6 months, the concentration was on testing because we just didn't have vaccines. Are there enough test locations? Is there enough testing being captured to get a real sense of the virus in the community?
The answer to that is an emphatic no. And I was one of those voices early on in the pandemic that advocated for an increase in testing, but not just testing, rapid testing, because the purpose of getting the test is so folks can modify their behavior. Once you're positive, you should quarantine. We do tell folks to do that until they get the results, but as we do know, what we tell people and what they do is two different things. But once you do know that you have a confirmed case of the coronavirus, and if you're symptomatic COVID-19, you should be quarantined and away from other folks to further break the transmission. And as you can see, now we have long lines at testing centers, and there was one testing center down here in South Florida that actually had to turn people away as a result because they reached their capacity. Yeah. I'm currently doing testing at my office, and I've seen a huge spike in people coming in to get tested, and I haven't advertised at all. It's just a result of what's currently going on.
Yeah, word of mouth and concern growing in the community, knowing that this Delta variant is circulating. Dr. Bernard Ashby is with us. Dr. Ashby, stick with us, cardiologist and the Florida lead for the Committee to Protect Healthcare. 800-743-WLRN, our phone number, live on this Friday afternoon to join our conversation. What are you experiencing here during this pandemic and the Delta variant of COVID-19 raging through the community? 800-743-9576. I say raging because we're seeing a double-digit increase in infections. At WLRN is our handle on Twitter. Cecilia in Hollywood is joining us. Thanks for calling in. You're on the radio.
Yes. Hello, good afternoon. I have a question, and it's regarding my son. Actually, my son last year had a condition called ITP, which is a low platelet count. He was hospitalized twice for that. Now he's fine. Later, he had a symptomatic, COVID, and we found out after we did a antibody testing. And then this year, he had the first dose of the Pfizer. And then when it was time for him to get the second dose, he got very, very scared because of all the things that he had been listening or hearing in the media. And I am very concerned now with this, Delta.
Yeah.
And so my question is, if he gets the second shot, will he awaken, this earlier condition that he had? He's very scared of that, but I don't know how to explain to him that it's safe, and I don't even know if it's safe
Gotcha.
for the condition he had.
Yeah, Cecilia, I appreciate that. Dr. Ashby, can you give any guidance to Cecilia? Her son, compromised with an underlying condition, has one of the two-dose recommendation of the Pfizer vaccine.
So excellent question, Cecilia. And first, I would preface this by I'm not going to give any specific recommendations to your son. That should be a conversation between you, him, and his pediatrician. But what I can tell you is about the data that's out there. And there's a huge blind spot when it comes to natural immunity. And, I, as a physician, I am not political. I don't care about, Republican, Democrat, conservative, progressive, when it comes to the health and wellness of our country and our citizens and our and my patients in our community. So I would like to state that. But there's been several studies that have come out from Israel, from Yale, from the Cleveland Clinic, all of which show that natural immunity is actually on par with the mRNA vaccines. Now, as far as the Delta variant, we're not sure. Furthermore, there's been several proxy studies. When I say proxy, I mean not real world studies, but in vitro in the lab, that have shown that just one dose of the vaccine in folks with previous infection is really all that you need to induce what we call hybrid immunity. And that hybrid immunity is thought to be superior to those with vaccines or those with natural immunity. Now, we don't have the real world data to back that up.
Right.
And so I say that with a grain of salt. But as far as the two-dose recommendations, I firmly believe that should be modified to just one dose. And we should pursue getting dosages to folks with previous infection as sort of a booster. But that is sort of controversial, and that's something that I encourage all who are listening to look into and discuss with their medical professionals. But the data thus far does indicate that there is really no significant benefit to adding a second dose, at least based on immunological studies thus far.
Maggie in Hollywood has a question for us as well. Go ahead, Maggie.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity. I read this morning on an article that in India, where the numbers were so high just recently, the numbers have gone down 90%. And this is where the variant originated. So I had a question about that, and also the newspaper brought up this question whether or not this variant is like a forest fire that ignites itself and then it burns out by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, quite the metaphor.
In the UK as well.
Yeah, let's put that to Dr. Ashby. What do you know about the Delta variant and how fast it seems to be spreading? The exponential increase in contagiousness it is compared to the Alpha variety. What they're experiencing in India, could it run its course, so to speak?
So that is another great question, and I'm confident enough to say I don't know. There are several dynamics at play that we can see and that we can't see. One is the number of folks who are vaccinated in our country. Two is the way we live and our standard of living and how we interact with one another. But what I do know is that the Delta variant, again, is much more transmissible, and you're more likely to spread it amongst individuals when you're in close proximity. There's been several cases of super spreader events, particularly the one in Provincetown, Massachusetts, where nearly 900 folks got infected, 3/4 of which were previously vaccinated, and the majority of those developed symptoms. So we do know that the Delta variant is much more transmissible, and really I can't give an exact answer, but I can tell you that we will see, we're not at the peak currently, and we will see a higher peak of the viral transmission before we reach any plateau.
Doctor, we have just a few moments left with you, but I want to try to squeeze in a caller here, Mario in Fort Lauderdale. Go ahead, Mario. If you can get to your question quickly, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, Mario, I'm sorry. We got a bad cell connection there. But what I do know is a question here, doctor, about a 75-year-old with arthritis concerned about vaccination. What can you help Mario with there?
So it depends on the type of arthritis. If it's osteoarthritis, there's no contraindication there. If it's rheumatoid arthritis, again, that's something that should be discussed with their physician. Okay. I would just like to add one last point that the hospitals currently are surging. Our ICUs are filling up rapidly. And unfortunately, we've had to put off elective cases and even cancel some, and that's impacting the other health-related issues that are going on that has always been there. And I just want to make a call to our governor to do what other governors are doing, including the governor of Arkansas, who reinstituted the state of emergency and is actually looking into removing the ban on mask mandates, because we really need to do this based on the science and not politicize this, because again, people are literally getting hospitalized, dying, and I'm not even talking about long COVID, which is a real issue in which I'm dealing with the number of my patients. So I just really need to get the backing of our leaders so that we in the healthcare industry can do our job to the best of our ability.
Dr. Ashby, we'll let you get back to those patients. We do appreciate you spending some time with us here on this Friday on the South Florida Roundup. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much.
Dr. Bernard Ashby, our guest here on the South Florida Roundup, cardiologist and the Florida lead for the Committee to Protect Healthcare. More of your phone calls still to come, 800-743-WLRN, 800-743-9576. And what municipal mayors and leaders are doing about the spread of the coronavirus. That's next. Welcome back to the South Florida Roundup here on WLRN. I'm Tom Hudson. Thanks again for listening. Just a few weeks ago, it seemed that South Florida, like the rest of the country, was beginning to return to normal, or as close to normal can be during a pandemic. But as COVID-19 cases have risen across the nation, Florida is once again a hotspot for new infections. This week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention revised its mask recommendation to say all people, regardless of vaccination status, should wear masks indoors in areas where the coronavirus cases are surging. That includes all of South Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis has prohibited local governments from enforcing COVID-19 mitigation efforts, however, but some South Florida governments are moving forward, reinstating mask mandates in municipal buildings. Should local governments be able to create and enforce safety measures, keeping communities safe? Are reinstated mask mandates overstepping? Are they worthwhile? What should be done to help fight back against this wave of coronavirus cases? 800-743-WLRN, 800-743-9576. Scott Brook is with us now, City of Coral Springs Mayor. Mayor Brook, welcome to WLRN. Thanks for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Good afternoon.
Your city reinstated a mask mandate for people inside municipal buildings earlier this week. Why?
We sure did. Following both CDC guidelines and the expert advice that we rely on here in our city of Coral Springs from Dr. Peter Antevi, our major, commitment, as always, is public health and safety. We also don't want our own employees to get sick and spread the virus and thus have a shortage, especially in first responders at this time. So we think this is the safest, most conservative approach, and we believe this is in our citizens' best interest.
The Fort Lauderdale Mayor, Dean Tantralis, spoke with our WLRN Broward County reporter, Katie Switowski Munoz, on Wednesday, and Mayor Tantralis expressed curiosity about cities such as yours enacting mask policies for employees in buildings. This is what he said.
I'm not sure what authority they have to do so, but I certainly don't want to tangle with the governor right now when we really need to be trying to push people to get the vaccine.
What would you say to your municipal colleague to the east of Coral Springs about the authority that Coral Springs has regarding masks and employees?
Well, as I share, with people all the time, I respect our governor. I know Mayor Tantralis. I respect him. I respect his opinion. And we have different opinions. I'm happy to rely on the legal opinion of our city attorney, John Hearn. I've worked with him over the years. I first got here in 2002. So I respect Mayor Tantralis' opinion. At this time, we're relying on our city attorney's opinion. Again, I think overall the governor's had a good balanced approach to the vaccine, to COVID. And I think we're definitely united in that we want our citizens to get vaccinated. It's not a political statement. It's a public safety concern. So we're happy to be doing what we're doing. Obviously, is it somewhat of a pain? Absolutely. Absolutely. Would I rather not wear a mask? Sure. But with the Delta variant's numbers and with people getting sick, I talked to Shane Strum yesterday. He said the hospitals here in Broward are pretty full. We need to get our citizens vaccinated. Yeah. We need to move down the numbers. And once we can get down to under 5% again, I have no problem supporting our city managers and emergency management directors' decision to remove the mask requirement. We did ask those that were not vaccinated to do so voluntarily for a period of time. And now we're asking everybody in our facilities just to be on the safe side. Please be kind enough, wear a face covering.
You mentioned Shane Strum. He is the president and CEO of Broward Health, one of the big public health facilities serving the northern area of Broward County. Regarding vaccines, Mayor, has Coral Springs required city employees to be vaccinated? Will it?
We have not.
Okay.
We have not required city employees to be vaccinated.
And could that be under consideration as you look at some of the exponential increases in some of these infection rates that we're seeing?
Could it be considered? I'm not sure. You never know. I mean, if all of a sudden we got to 25% infection rate, probably would be considered. But it wouldn't be considered in a vacuum. It would be considered in conjunction with our employees, the unions, and city management. Certainly wouldn't be considered in a vacuum.
What else is in your toolbox as a local municipal leader in the state of Florida, given that the state legislature and the governor have signed a new law really limiting the emergency powers of local officials for more than just a few days?
Yeah, I think what's in our power, at least here in Coral Springs, is we have an incredible community that's very collaborative, very cooperative. I would love to engage some of our committees to not only have these discussions, but share openly about the importance of being vaccinated. The numbers appear to me to be clear about the deaths that have occurred recently. And 99% of those, my understanding is, have been for unvaccinated folk. Whatever we can do to encourage people to get vaccinated, I think we can and should do. Obviously, it is a personal choice, and I respect that as the mayor of Coral Springs.
Scott Brook is the mayor of that city, Coral Springs. Mayor Brook, thanks so much for joining us here on the South Florida Roundup. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for having the conversation.
Always important, and it's going to continue now with Tony Fernandez, a council member at the of Miami Lakes. Council member Fernandez, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us what is under consideration, what the conversation is like in Miami Lakes regarding the city response to the increase in COVID-19 infections that the South Florida region is experiencing.
So as Mayor Brook alluded to, the most important thing is encouraging and creating awareness around vaccination and trying to to encourage our residents to, that have access, that are able to get vaccinated at this time, to do so. Internally, our policy is, continuously being evaluated. One thing that did change this week, since we do contract police services from Miami-Dade County, our police officers are now, as part of that department, they're required to wear masks, whether they're vaccinated or not.
In the law enforcement portion there of Miami Lakes, any further consideration to similar to what Mayor Brook is doing in Coral Springs and having mask requirements for employees and visitors in municipal buildings?
So our mask policy for employees and visitors is staying the same for now. We're obviously watching what the state and county governments are doing, but for right now the policy has not changed.
And what is that policy, council member?
So employees that are vaccinated are allowed to elect to not wear masks. Unvaccinated employees are obviously required to do so, and visitors are so if visitors are vaccinated, they're not required to wear them as well. As of now,
as you know, council member, the difficulty in that is verification. Any verification procedures in place to verify someone's vaccination status?
For employees, there is. For the general public, it's kind of on the honor system.
Yeah, understood. What's that status like for employees of the city of Miami Lakes?
So they're able to upon providing proof of vaccination, they're able to elect into not wear. They submit their paperwork into the town manager's office, and they're able to exempt out of that.
We're talking about the municipal response to the increase in COVID-19 cases here in South Florida. We spoke earlier with the Coral Springs Mayor, Scott Brook. We're speaking now with Tony Fernandez, council member in Miami Lakes. 800-743-WLRN, 800-743-9576. What are you experiencing in your town, your village, your city throughout South Florida? 800-743-WLRN. Councilmember Fernandez, as you are experiencing the increase of infections as a council member, how are you and the rest of the elected officials ascertaining some of this information, and how are you looking at it, given the responsibilities you have for the town of Miami Lakes, sitting inside, of course, a large metropolitan area?
Of course. So we're definitely working and receiving updates from the state, from the CDC, from our county, and watching what other municipalities around us are doing as well. Right? We can't, in Miami Lakes, we're part of the greater Miami-Dade County. We can't operate in a vacuum, right? Our and that's really part of the decision-making process too. We want to try to keep things as easy to follow for the residents as possible, and try to stay consistent with other municipalities.
Yeah. For those who do a lot of business in government buildings, you go in and out of a city hall or administrative building in one town or one village, and you go across the street or down the block, you may be in another town, another village that may have different rules. As you know, Councilman, Miami-Dade County now requires the use of masks for employees and visitors at county facilities. The Miami-Dade County Mayor, Daniela Levine Cava, asked businesses to take part again as well.
We're calling on our Miami-Dade County businesses to step up and help us to protect our community with smart COVID policies in their places of business, and also encouraging everyone, all employees, to get vaccinated.
Councilmember Fernandez, what about the business community in Miami Lakes? What role is it playing? What role, as a council member, would you like it to play?
I think, consistent with our message, to try to encourage everybody to get vaccinated. Our mayor, in fact, last week, made the decision. He was one of the holdouts, if you will. And he made the decision to get vaccinated and shared it, publicly to encourage, both businesses and individuals that have, maybe been reluctant to do so until now, to to make the decision. The one statistic that's been consistent during this process is that COVID is deadly, right? That those numbers have not changed. That point, 2% mortality rate has not changed. So in kind of trying to encourage all residents to get vaccinated, I think that was a brave step by the mayor.
Mayor Manny said we invited him onto this program. Unfortunately, it just wouldn't allow for his schedule here. So we do appreciate your time, Councilmember Fernandez, to represent Miami Lakes here in our conversation. Do you have, or do your council members have any feelings regarding how the state is communicating what power you as a locally elected council member have in regards to responding to the pandemic as you see it in your community?
I think that opens up a greater conversation about home rule and our home rule charter. It's you kind of have to weigh both sides on the issue. Obviously, the governor was adamant in his and the legislature were adamant in the restriction of emergency powers. So it's something that's going to be seen and played out and potentially improved upon and tweaked as we go forward.
I'll take that opportunity to tell folks about a podcast that we've produced here at WLRN called Tallahassee Takeover, looking at examining just this issue, council member, about the push and pull of power between local governments and the state government in Tallahassee. If you just do a podcast search on your favorite podcast app of Tallahassee Takeover, you will find multiple episodes, each one kind of discussing the overall issue, but also how the issue manifests in regards to some specific challenges, for instance, cruise ships in Key West, for instance, which was a big issue here. That's Tallahassee Takeover at your favorite podcast app. Council member, appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for making an effort and spending some time here with our listeners.
Thank you very much.
Council member Tony Fernandez of the town of Miami Lakes here on the South Florida Roundup. All right, still to come, we are going to talk about the Surfside collapse as the final missing victim was identified this week. And still lots and lots of questions about the safety of older buildings in South Florida. That's next. Welcome back to the South Florida Roundup here on WLRN. I'm Tom Hudson. Thanks again for listening this week and for supporting public radio. Asteaheda was 54 years old. She was missing for more than a month. Her remains were identified this week, a victim of the sudden middle-of-the-night collapse of the Champlain Towers South condominium building in Surfside. She was the last missing victim to be identified. 98 people died in that disaster, one of the deadliest building failures in U.S. history. It's led to a quick examination and re-examination of hundreds of older buildings that show signs of deterioration. Imara Riley is on Miami-Dade County's Unsafe Structures Board, and during a meeting held last week, she expressed frustration over an estimated 1,000 pending unsafe structure cases.
I know the name unsafe structure, drives people like, oh my God, the building's going to fall down. No, that's not necessarily the case. When a building is declared unsafe, it could be something for a simple fire that happened in a corner, but they automatically declare the whole building unsafe, so, it can be resolved. Doesn't necessarily mean that it cannot be occupied or that it's a life safety issue.
Do you own or rent in a condominium building? Maybe you own an apartment building. How and what do you know about the condition of the building? How about the ability to pay for any needed repairs? 800-743-WLRN is our phone number to join our conversation live on this Friday. 800-743-9576. You'll find us on Twitter at WLRN. Danny Rivero, reporter here at WLRN, joins us. You've been reporting on, in, and around Surfside since that awful early morning collapse of the building. What can you tell us, Danny, about this 1,000 pending unsafe building cases before this commission in Miami-Dade County?
Right. So just to give a little bit of the background. The Unsafe Structures Board is basically a county board that's been set up to help process and hear cases that have been deemed unsafe by not just unincorporated Miami-Dade County, but also municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
So places like Miami Beach, Homestead, etc., all the way down the line.
Yeah.
So if any of these cities have those cases, they refer them then to this board to hear them. And the 1,000 pending case backlog is basically the result of years of some cases pending, and they're just on the boards. And as we heard Aymara Riley say, it's not always that the concrete is corroded, the rebar is about to collapse. It could be a variety of things, but in that meeting last week, many board members did express a lot of frustration that there were so many things that were still pending, and they meet once a month and they just do not seem to get through that backlog.
And why such a backlog? As the board member mentioned, it may be a minor fire that was the cause of this unsafe declaration, but the building structurally may be still sound and fine, but they have to work through it, to something as, deteriorating, spalling concrete of a building that with rebar deteriorating, something, and everything in between. And we know how many thousands and thousands of buildings over 4 stories in Miami-Dade County. So why such a backlog here?
Right. So the county had a representative there, Spencer Erickson, who's the supervisor of the Unsafe Structures Division at Miami-Dade County. And he kind of responded to a lot of this frustration. And he said, look, we defer cases, but when we defer cases, that's because movement is happening in these cases. So if there's, say, fire damage, they're taking steps to go towards repairing that. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, they'll defer the cases, but they have to have some kind of verification that from an engineer saying the property is safe temporarily while the work is being done, but then the case gets kicked down the road. The frustration from the board members is that they don't have any interim information about where these cases are. They just have been over the years told to take the county's word for it, that these things everything is good, everything's okay. And now after Surfside, they're saying, well, we want the documents. We want people from the cities, condo board members to come here and talk to us, show us what's going on, and really provide that proof.
So these are cases of buildings that have already been inspected and have been deemed unsafe for a variety of reasons. In the meantime, we know a number of municipalities, including counties, have ordered inspections of buildings over a certain height or older than a certain age. What do we know about the state of that flood of inspections?
Well, we still don't know actually the full scope of it, because it encompasses so many municipalities plus unincorporated areas just in Miami-Dade County, plus you got Broward County, Palm Beach County, there's a lot going on. So the full scope of it is really not known yet, and a lot of these cases have not gotten to this Unsafe Structures Board. Like I did a story for WLRN a few weeks ago about a condo building in Miami Beach, and they said, if you don't meet this deadline, we're going to refer you to that board. In that case, they did meet the deadline, the city told me, but that's the stick here, that if you don't get an engineer to sign off on these things, they're going to refer you to these things, and your building could be evacuated eventually. Yeah,
it could be ordered evacuated. And we've seen that happen in North Miami Beach, for instance, at the Crestview condominium towers. 800-743-WLRN, talking about structure safety here after the Surfside collapse. 800-743-9576. Danny Rivero, WLRN reporter, is with us. Penny Mays is also with us, associate attorney at Glazer and Sachs, looking at condominium law and construction law. Penny, welcome to the program. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
How has Surfside changed how condominium and apartment residents are engaging with building boards?
I really do believe that since Surfside, a lot more board members, a lot more unit owners are paying attention to what's going on. A lot of times people in condominiums are kind of absentee, right? They vote for the board of directors, and they believe that the board of directors should operate the association instead of just making sure they're an active participant in their communities. And I'm seeing a lot more activity on the part of unit owners becoming aware, wanting to review documents, wanting to know what's going on and what the board's plan is moving forward.
Yeah, how is that activity or interest manifesting? Are folks showing up at the board meetings, even if they're on Zoom? room? Are they demanding documents? Let me see the 40-year inspection of the building that I purchased a condominium or rent an apartment in. What does that look like?
Well, at first, it's attending the meetings, right? That's always the first step. When you have noticed that the board is going to have a meeting and on the agenda is the 40-year certification, if in fact the municipality has sent a demand to the board. The way it works is that the cities send out every year to buildings that meet that 40-year requirement a document that says you have so much time to complete a 40-year certification by an engineer. So once that happens, the board should put the membership on notice. We've received this. This is what we have to do to comply with the city or county's requirements. After that, the board then is tasked with retaining an engineer. That means interviewing engineers around the community and seeing which one best suits the association. You have to remember, a lot of these people are on fixed income, so the first complaint is always how much money does an engineering firm cost? And they're not cheap. They have to go through and inspect all of the maintenance records. They have to go through and look at each and every component of the building, from structural, electrical, plumbing, everything. And so it's not a cheap endeavor to get these reports done. So oftentimes, until the boards can raise enough funds through special assessments or get the vote to move funds from reserves, the associations are very hesitant to increase their costs of monthly assessments to be able to pay for these engineers.
Yeah. And Danny, not only is it not cheap, it's not quick either in order to have a comprehensive look at some of these buildings. The larger the building, the longer it takes, the more expensive, of course, it's going to be. But the timeline for this has to be compressed because of Surfside, of course, and the real existential concern of folks in older buildings and looking at, what they thought may have been a crack earlier, and now let me look back in the board minutes, let me request some documents from the condominium board, and all of this can take some substantial time.
Right, and that point really speaks to there's tension with two ideas here, because after the tragedy at Surfside, you have thousands of buildings across South Florida that are now saying, okay, now we need to hire someone, we need to get this done. And there was a shortage of a lot of aspects of the construction engineering field before Surfside, but now in the wake of it, you can't find all the inspectors that you want. So you want it fast, you want it done well. Well, there's a shortage, and everyone is going at the same time to that limited finite resource. So it'll take a while to sort this out, I imagine.
Yeah, Penny, what are boards experiencing even after the fact? Say a building had that inspection already done and was in the process of getting construction bids, for instance. How should residents work with construction repair recommendations post Surfside?
Well, I always say you have to prioritize, right? Especially when money's tight, construction materials are extremely expensive nowadays. You have to prioritize, and that's what your engineer is for. You retain the services of an engineer. Ask him, what's the priority here? Is this something that we can defer down the road? Is if it's just painting, or if it's just a stairwell that needs to be painted. But if it's something structural, your engineer is going to tell you, look, guys, you got to do whatever it takes to get this particular item taken care of. A lot of associations go and get loans from banks in order to be able to take care of their structural repairs when it comes to their 40-year survey.
Yeah. Let me squeeze in a caller. Carmelo in Miami. Go ahead. You are on the radio.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I live in a small building, so the buildings that are less than 150 units and less than $500,000 budget, they have less requirements here in Florida to disclose financials. And even the requirements that they have, if they violate them, the BPR, which is the regulator, doesn't do anything besides giving a fine. For example, in my building, they never give the reserve schedules with the budget or with the financials, which is a clear violation, and it's nothing we can do besides just getting a fine, which the owners pay.
Carmelo, I'm quick on time, but I want to put that question to Penny in terms of the financial disclosure responsibility of a board in smaller buildings that Carmelo is describing.
Well, I want to say, first off, there's always something that the unit owners can do. If the unit owners do not like what the board is doing, they're not disclosing information, you recall them. And whenever there's a vote for new board members, run for the board of directors. So there's always something that unit owners can do when it comes to making sure that the board is compliant with what's going on. You have to hold each other accountable for the funds that are supposed to be put in reserves for the association. There are also different methods, and typically the DBPR is really stringent when it comes to financial documents.
Let me just insert, that's the state agency that regulates this area.
Correct.
Yeah.
They're the ones that oversee whether or not boards are being compliant with Chapter 718 of the Florida statutes. And so I always encourage my unit owner clients, as well as our association clients who are on the board of directors, make sure you read 718. It's not a fun read, but it will definitely protect your property. It will definitely lead you to a lot of information, even if it just leads you to ask questions, right? Sometimes it's good to read something and ask questions so that you can learn what your rights are. You can learn how the board has to be accountable to you. And that's just a matter of getting involved and not being a passive owner in a condominium.
Yeah, it may not be the best thriller read, but Florida statute when it comes to condominium law is quite important. Penny Mays, Associate Attorney at Glazer and Sachs here in South Florida. Penny, thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me.
Danny Rivero, always great work there. Keep up the great reporting, and thanks for sharing it as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Wonderful. Finally, in the roundup this week, thousands of people marched in Washington, D.C. this week in support of the protests in Cuba against the communist government. These protests began July 11. Janelle Gates has been working to list people arrested and missing in Cuba since those protests began on the island. The effort is chronicled at cubamissing.com. Janelle, thanks for joining us today. Describe this website and why you decided to put it together.
We had heard of lists being created verifying the reported cases of forced disappearance, arrest, and detainees inside of Cuba. But I felt that it was very crucial to give face to this movement. Myself and other volunteers felt called to come together and collaborate to very quickly bring this to life. And we are working very closely with the legal group that is the one verifying the information and making it accessible to our community.
I wanted to ask you about the verification, but first, how do you gather the information about those who are missing?
So the initial list is vetted by a group that has, for a very long time, been devoted to Cuba. They are lawyers, independent journalists, and volunteers, both outside and inside of Cuba, very courageously doing the very difficult task of verifying testimonies and documenting these cases.
And how is the information of those who are missing verified?
It is verified by speaking directly to a relative that can verify their information, their account, and so basically they have to be able to have a specific witness that is providing the information.
How has the number of missing changed since the protests began on the island in early July?
You know, we don't know what the total number is because remember that communication lines have been completely shut down and suppressed by the Cuban government, as they always have, but especially now. But verified accounts, we started around 400 and it's gone up to above 700.
Wow. Tell me about some of those names, some of those individuals, some of those family stories that have really resonated with you.
Oh my goodness. To be honest with you, in the task of identifying photos and attaching them to names, it's been incredibly moving. We're talking attorneys, pastors, accountants, students, artists, musicians, actors. We're talking about a very diverse, educated, involved populace. This is not some random occurrence. This is widespread across the country. And the accounts are just endless. I think that the emails coming up from people pleading their cases in total desperation, mothers begging for their children, saying all they want is a peaceful protest and for the end of an abusive regime. We actually just launched our Instagram and Facebook page, and you'll see the testimony of a mother talking about her 17-year-old daughter who was merely observing events She was on her way to do her hair and was caught up, watching. Perhaps she participated, who knows? But the point is she was an innocent bystander by all accounts. And when the crowds dispersed, she ran away in fear. She was taken with a group of people, and the mother could not find her anywhere. She eventually tracked her down, and she was not told about her trial until 11 p.m. the evening before her trial. The girl was not given a lawyer. She was stood before 11 other young ladies and women who none of which knew each other, and then supposed witnesses were present to give random testimony about these 12 women, of which no one knew each other. So a complete false testimony, complete charade, and no opportunity for legal representation. There's other cases we're hearing of forms of torture. The attorney that I work with very closely was telling me about terrible reports of stripping the kids nude and things that we don't even want to repeat on the radio. So just the atrocities, the human rights abuses and atrocities against the Cuban people are escalating, and we're going to stand behind them and want to hold the government accountable by all accounts.
Janelle, let me hear your thoughts on the voices that you're hearing from the island. Many people have said that the Cubans on the island need to be listened to more than the diaspora here in South Florida, for instance. Do you agree with that sentiment? And what are you hearing from the island?
I actually formerly was a co-founder and still related to Roots of Hope. And we always saw our role as part of the diaspora as being an echo for the people in Cuba. So nothing that we've ever said or worked upon stemmed from us. I can't speak for other groups, but I can say that we are completely committed to hearing the words that they're saying, to listen to every chat, every communication. Where just last night, I asked the group, they were participating and speaking to young people on the island, and we're constantly asking ourselves, what are they saying? What are their talking points? We're not the people with the ideas. We're giving them a voice because, unfortunately, their government oppresses them for attempting to have one.
That is Janelle Gates with CubaMissing.com. It lists more than 500 people missing, arrested, or their whereabouts unknown since the July 11th protests in Cuba. Another 163 have been released. That'll do it for the South Florida Roundup this week. It is produced by Andrea Perdomo. Our engagement editor is Katie Lepre. Lance Dixon, our digital editor. News director Terrence Shepard. Alicia Zuckerman is our editorial director. The director of radio operations and the program's technical supervisor is Peter J. Mertz. Richard Ives answers the phones. I'm Tom Hudson. Thanks for calling, listening, tweeting, and supporting Public Radio. The program is made possible by Willie the Bee Man, bee removal specialist.
WLRN Public Media.